Welcome to the Alex Salmond Show from the historic and beautiful English city of Bath. Why am I here in these lovely surroundings? Well, to interview Scotland's most controversial and most successful political blogger. But first, over to Taz in the studio.
Our subject today is one of the UK's top 10 political bloggers who electrifies Scottish politics from the douce and peaceful surroundings of the English city of Bath.
I've been an independence guy all my life. My dad used to work for Billy Wolfe, the former leader of the SNP in Bathgate. So I wanted to make a contribution. Obviously, I couldn't go knocking on doors and stuff. So I decided to do it online.
And take a close look at this little visitor who is listening in to the conversation, of which much more later. In last week's show, our top Tory tipster Peter Oborne forecast that Boris Johnson would be a runaway favourite for the leadership race and was best placed to reach the finishing line at number 10 Downing Street. However, Peter also caused something of a furore by speculating that for Johnson, becoming Tory leader and assuming the office of Prime Minister might not be quite the same thing. If Prime Minister May considers that he could not command a majority in the House of Commons.
20 Tories who say we're not going to serve under Johnson or vote for him, that he can't. The House just says no, just a great big raspberry. And Mrs May then sails off into the sunset as remains as Prime Minister.
And this is what you had to say about the Tory leadership stakes from your tweets, messages and emails in relation to last week's show. Rob says, don't know what all the fuss is about, as whoever wins won't be Prime Minister for long, as come the general elections, the Tories along with Labour will be getting their P45, just what they deserve. Jimac says, it was Boris Johnson who complained bitterly when Gordon Brown took over from Tony Blair and was installed as Prime Minister. Boris furiously argued that a general election should be called, as Great Britain had an unelected Prime Minister. I wonder, he says, will Boris, if offered the keys to number 10, refuse them instead of insisting on a general election? I doubt it. I agree. Roy says, give us English the vote, we'll put you out of your misery. Lee says, we want English independence. MJ Anderson says, I'd happily support all countries of the UK to become independent. John says there is a new swell of nationalistic support, and little wonder when you see the contempt the favourites in the Tory leadership have for Scotland. Now is the time. And finally, Jim says, great interview, Alec. I really like Peter Oborne. Now, we'll keep a close eye on developments as the contest unfolds further. But today, we continue our series on top political bloggers. To a great extent, political blogging has stepped into the vacuum of serious political comment left by much of the press. In previous shows, we've noted the success of former Ambassador Craig Murray in commanding a UK top 10 slot with a blog which concentrates on Scottish politics. The same point applies to Mick Fealty of Northern Irish blog Slugger O'Toole. In addition, Mick has achieved a substantial position of influence in the politics of the province, although he hasn't himself lived in Ireland for the best part of 30 years. As testimony to their impact, these shows have recorded a combined online viewership on Alex's Facebook alone of over 308,000. Both of these points apply, of course, to Scotland's most popular and often most controversial blogger, Stuart Campbell of Wings Over Scotland. Often under gale force attack from the mainstream media and engaged in what can best be described as vigorous debates on Twitter, this hasn't stopped Wings Over Scotland rising to number 3 in the UK political blogging charts. Alex caught up with Stuart Campbell in the beautiful city of Bath.
So Stuart, now that we're sitting down, tell me about this Reverend business and the dog collar. I mean, what's it all about?
Yeah, that's an odd one. I mean, partly it's just a bit of fun. It really winds some people up. But I originally started doing it because, firstly, just to make myself easier to find on the internet, because obviously Stuart Campbell's a really common name. There's millions of people. If you search for Stuart Campbell, there was a Scotland rugby player, a footballer, there's a canoeist, there's a famous gynecologist, of all sorts of people. So by becoming Reverend Stuart Campbell, I'm the only one of those.
Let's dispense with the dog collar before the Unionist press says that you were impersonating a good Reverend in the Alex Salmond Show.
I think we've had quite enough fun with him as it is.
How did the Wings Over Scotland get started?
Well, yeah, I mean, as you say, after the SNP majority in 2011, it was obvious there was going to be a referendum.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I've been, And I've been an independence guy all my life. My dad used to work for Billy Wolfe, the former leader of the SNP in Bathgate. Guys, I wanted to make a contribution. Obviously, I couldn't go knocking on doors and stuff. So I thought I'll do something.
Well, you could knock on the doors in Bath.
Well, yeah.
You get an interesting reception.
There's not a lot of votes to be won there, though, unfortunately. So, yeah, so I decided to do it online. And I tried very briefly. I looked for other Scottish politics websites, and there weren't really any very good ones. I briefly wrote for one that was run by a variety of people from various parties. But I wrote one article for them, and I made a sort of joke in one of the comments and was immediately ostracised and disowned. And I thought, oh God, I'm going to have to do this myself, aren't I? So yeah, I just started up Wings it was just originally just a short digest of things that were in the Scottish news.
And why Wings over Scotland? I mean, tell me about the name. I mean, there's kind of symbolism behind it. Some people have said sinister symbolism behind it.
Have they?
What's this Wings issue?
The name just sort of almost happened by accident. I'd always written, my very first website when I was as a video game writer was called World of Stuart. And ever since then, I've had blogs that had WOS as the initials. There were various permutations of it. The most recent one that I'd had was Wings over Sealand, which you might know is the little kind of independent nation just off the coast of Britain, and set up in an old World War II fort, which I've always found a fascinating place. So when I came to write the politics blog, it just kind of seemed an obvious progression from Wings over Sealand to Wings over Scotland.
And what are you consciously, I mean, the purpose of your blog was to rebalance media in the sense that the written press in Scotland, some people would argue the television as well, was pretty overwhelmingly biased against Scottish independence. So was your express aim to debunk some of the unionist press, as well as providing the online information that independence supporters needed?
Yeah, I mean, it still is a ridiculous state of affairs where you have a political viewpoint held by roughly half of the country, represented by essentially, certainly at that time, no media at all. There were no newspapers in favour of independence in 2011 when we started. But yeah, the thing that really drove it was when I started to take more of an interest in Scottish politics, which was initially in 2007, but then really in 2011, I was watching these things being written in the newspapers, things on the telly, that I knew for a fact weren't true. And I'm watching and I'm waiting for the journalists or the presenters to go, hang on, that's not true. And it never happened. And I couldn't understand why these obvious falsehoods weren't being challenged. And it became obvious that I was going to have to do it myself. I mean, the first and most obvious one is the myth that Labour can't win a UK election without Scotland. And it's just not true. It's never been true. There have been almost no points in history where Labour needed Scottish MPs to have a majority. So this whole thing that Scotland becoming independent would somehow betray the rest of the UK and condemn it to Tory governments forever, there is not the tiniest grain of truth in it. And I couldn't believe that this thing was just being repeated over and over on state broadcasters, on national television and in all the papers.
Your site is always described as the controversial Wings over Scotland. That's sometimes a lot worse than that. And usually people point to your use of language, particularly bad language, which, interesting enough, as I can see, is not on the site itself, it's on your tweeting.
That's right, yeah, we don't swear at all on the website.
So firstly, how do you defend, firstly, the use of language in that way, and isn't it a distraction from the serious message on the site?
Well, I mean, I always find it comical and ridiculous that Scottish people pretend to be offended by a bit of swearing. Who's the most famous, the most celebrated, the most beloved Scottish cultural export of all time? It's Billy Connolly. A man who not only isn't ashamed of swearing, a man who has turned swearing into an art form, and who makes a very strong case, a positive case for doing it. Probably our biggest current cultural, certainly entertainment world figure is Frankie Boyle, who is very much the same. We celebrate fictional characters like Malcolm Tucker, written by the wonderful Armando Iannucci, who is the most magnificent, creative swearer in in the history of
You're not trying
literature.
to counterpoint your reverend persona. You're the swearing reverend.
I don't believe that we should practice kind of dictionary apartheid. So-called swear words, they're not in a special sealed section at the back of the dictionary with a warning that says not to be used. They're just words. They're words which have a purpose and a use. And if you want to express a certain view, if you're, say, particularly angry about a government policy that is going to cause thousands of people to die, like the most recent welfare reforms, which have, beyond any reasonable doubt, caused thousands or tens of thousands of people to die an early death. How can you express anger, an adequate and sufficient level of anger about that, without using these words? What else are these words for?
Now, let's go on to the referendum proper, where the site does something which is quite extraordinary when you look back on it. You published a book.
Mm.
So, I mean, I say it's extraordinary because the fact you've got a very successful website, a very popular political blog, and then you decide to issue a book, a written form of where did the Wee Blue Book come from?
The Wee Blue Book was basically always the goal from very early on. What I realised is that you're going to have a hard time actually winning anyone over with a pro-independence website, because before they ever read your arguments, they've got to want to come to your website and read it. And people tend not to do that kind of thing if they're opposed to you, or a lot of people just aren't that interested in the internet. So what I realised very early on was that I was going to have to produce something that we could get out and physically put in people's hands, people who wouldn't come to a pro-independence website, people who wouldn't want to read stuff by me, and also partly because of the stuff that you say about being vilified by the unionist press. They were the enemy. They weren't going to give us a fair shout. So we had to put something directly into people's hands that we could target and just give the normal man and woman in the street our argument put the best way we could. So the website has always only ever really been a tool for the production of the Wee Blue Book.
And the Wee Blue Book was a printed, I mean, the argument in modern politics, so like the Brexiteers in the referendum in 2016, you should keep the message as short and simple as possible on the side of a bus. But the Wee Blue Book went in totally the opposite direction. How many pages, how many were issued? Yeah,
well, there's 72 pages, and we put out, well, between us and some other people, we put out over 300,000 physical copies. There were about 800,000 copies downloaded on people's iPads. And
were they bootlegged, or were they allowed?
No, we firmly encouraged people to do it every way they could. Some people printed them out at home, some people printed out giant A4 versions. It was translated into Gaelic, there were audio books of it. We absolutely encouraged people to get it out any possible way they could to as many people as they possibly could.
So that, these hundreds of thousands of this political booklet were being released. Do you think it had an impact on the Wee Blue Book was issued when, in the start, towards spring of 2014?
We didn't really start getting the print ones into people's hands until the start of September. And what I got told by people over and over again in unsolicited emails and letters and all kinds of stuff is that the Wee Blue Book really genuinely changed people's minds. They were saying, I gave this to my mum, she was never ever going to vote yes. And then 2 days later, she was out knocking doors with me.
So it quite literally was an eye-opener.
It seems to, that's what people tell me, yeah. I mean, I wasn't there. I had no part in the distribution. My kind of right-hand man, Lindsay Bruce, put together just an unbelievable distribution network for it. We got it to every corner of Scotland, from Selkirk to Stornoway and Lerwick to Berwick. It went absolutely everywhere, and the fact that feat was never recognised anywhere really is something I've still got to be in my bonnet about to that day. The fact that that wasn't considered newsworthy by the mainstream media is ludicrous.
Welcome back. Alex is interviewing top 10 political blogger Stuart Campbell of Wings Over Scotland. We take up the story with the website, originally designed to help the Yes cause in the 2014 referendum, making the decision to keep on blogging in the aftermath of the result.
Now, the referendum had famously, you predicted the result of the referendum. You estimated the Yes support at 45%. So the referendum's held. Your Wings Over Scotland had been formulated with the cause of progressing the independence referendum, the yes vote. So the vote's held, yes get beaten, but Wings Over Scotland continues. Why?
I hadn't really considered if we were going to continue afterwards. And it wasn't until, I think it was the day after, when everyone was absolutely broken, everybody was in pieces and down. And all those loyalist orange thugs appeared in George Square. And I think that galvanised the yes movement more than I think any amount of sort of talking to ourselves about picking ourselves up and getting back into the fight could have done. I think a huge number of people just went, we are not going to be beaten by these people. And there's a massive groundswell from Wings readers saying, you can't stop now, you've got to carry on doing this. We are sort of still in this fight. This has not been put to bed. And yeah, at the end, there was just no kind of option but to keep going.
So the site has carried on and has gone from success to success in terms of readers. So how many dedicated readers, isn't that the term they use? Do you get
unique readers?
Unique
yeah.
readers. I stand correct. How many unique readers?
We're all unique, but no. I mean, it fluctuates. It's been up and down from it peaked at sort of around almost 1 million in the couple of months leading up to the referendum. But our sort of average over the period's about 250,000 unique readers every month, which from a country of 4 million adults is a phenomenal reach. I still sort of can't quite believe how big it got. I had no imagination that it ever would. And
looking back over the many postings, is there one you look back and say, nah, I shouldn't have said that. That wasn't. I didn't get it right. Is there anything your mistakes you've made?
No, nothing sort of immediately springs to mind. One of the first ones that we got a lot of criticism for was one about the now sadly deceased Tory MP Alex Johnson. And he'd issued a horrible attack on Chris and Colin Weir, the lottery winners and SNP donors. And I called him quite unpleasant names in that article. It's the only time we've kind of ever really been rude on the website rather than on the Twitter account, which I regard as a sort of separate entity. And I don't really regret it as such. And I think it was absolutely fair comment, and I don't particularly feel bad about the language either, because for the reasons that I sort of said earlier on.
On the subject of fair comment, Kezia Dugdale famously won a case she brought against her for defamation, although it was accepted by the judge that you had been defamed because you're not homophobic. But nonetheless, she won the case on the grounds of fair comment. It wasn't that a bit a daft thing to do for a controversial blogger, someone who at least tweets in pretty strong and offensive terms, to take a politician to task for, we might argue, doing something similar to you?
I would firmly disagree that it's something similar. I mean, if Kezia Dugdale had written an article saying she thought I was a horrible human being, she's perfectly entitled to hold that opinion. I have no beef with that. Again, you'll know better than I do that how much abuse you get if you're involved in politics. I get called awful things 100 times a day. But there's a difference, not only morally but in law, between being unpleasant about someone and defaming them by saying things that are factually untrue. So I wanted to clearly have it established and have it in writing, as it were, that I am not a homophobe, that I wasn't tweeting homophobic things, and that people cannot say that.
Some people say that the association with controversial bloggers and controversial language actually harms the independence cause. Do you have any? Well, I don't think you've got any sympathy with that argument, but can you see what people are driving at, or do you think it's just part of the tactics of politics?
Well, I mean, it certainly is that. It's certainly an attempt to sort of divide and rule. But I mean, we've always been incredibly clear on Wings that we have no connection to the SNP. I've never been in the SNP. I've never voted for the SNP. We have nothing to do with the SNP. So certainly I don't see how it oughtn't to damage the SNP. Nicola Sturgeon is not responsible for me, and I've never suggested that she be. I mean, if anyone's responsible for me, it's probably Willie Rennie, because I've always been a Lib Dem voter.
And is this a revelation you're making in the Alex Salmond Show?
No, we've said this
established
from the start, because Bath is a Lib Dem Tory marginal. And I came down here when Chris Patton was the MP when I arrived here. And the first election that I ever voted in, we kicked him out. And Bath has been Lib Dem, with the exception of the 2015 election. A Tory got in, but then we kicked him back out in 2017.
So what we're basically saying is that if any political party reputation is at risk from the more florid style of Wings Over Scotland, then it's the Liberal Democrats.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm afraid I'm on their hands.
You wanted to make a contribution to the referendum, and then you saw a continuing hope because of the closeness of the result and because of the desire of people to continue the argument. But do you actually regard yourself as a practitioner making a contribution, or are you a commentator whose principal purpose is to debunk unionism and the unionist press?
Obviously, it is both of those. I primarily do see myself as a participant. Wings makes no pretense of being a neutral observer in the independence campaign. We are a pro-independence website.
So as a pro-independence website, therefore you must have a view on the direction that the independence campaign should take.
Well, I mean, we've said on Wings for some time now that the SNP, probably the Scottish Government, however you want to put it, should probably have been more proactive in the last few years. I personally would very much have liked to have seen a court challenge with regard to whether we need a Section 30 order or not to hold a referendum, because there's a great deal of learned legal opinion on both sides of that argument. It has in no way been... The Edinburgh Agreement, which you signed, as you know, did not settle that issue. It kind of moved it to one side and said, we are having a referendum now.
And is that wish based on what you believe the mood is in Scotland, or is it based on the disarray in Westminster?
Again, it's a little of both. I mean, it's very much the mood that I detect in the grassroots movement from people who talk to me every day. Most people have understood that the Scottish Government's policy has to sort of essentially sit back and wait for Brexit to unfold one way or another. But the people, I think, are increasingly unhappy that more active steps haven't been taken to prepare ourselves for when that day comes.
But surely the SNP leadership's point's a very fair one, that they don't have within their gift the right of a Section 30. Nicola Sturgeon has ruled out an unofficial referendum or a Catalonian-styled initiative. What are the options then? Isn't she and the leadership perfectly correct to say we just have to bide our time and wait for something else to happen?
Well, this is the problem. And if you rule out all of those options and the UK government just keeps saying now is not the time forever, you've got nowhere. There's nowhere else to go. It will never happen, and we'll all grow old and die before we ever have a second independence referendum. So there are only two avenues that I can see, one of them being an arrangement with perhaps a Labour government that doesn't have a majority and would be prepared to concede a referendum in exchange for support, or we go the legal route. I don't think the strategy of just asking over and over again until they cave in out of the kindness of their hearts is ever going to get us anywhere.
So one way or another, you're determined that the game should be afoot once again in Scotland, another referendum, another test. So can we anticipate another Wee Blue Book?
Oh, you certainly can, yeah. I mean, that's still the whole point of kind of Wings Over Scotland is to get to a referendum and have put another Wee Blue Book in people's hands that we will be printing this time sort of 4 to 5 times as many as we did the last time, because I think it is very powerful to give people facts. That's the thing that we do at Wings Over Scotland above anything else. You don't have to take our word for anything. We admit up front that we're biased, that we're pro-independence, but every claim that we make, every fact that we assert, we give you the source, we give you the link, we say, here are the facts, you go and look at them, don't take our word for it, decide for yourself whether we're telling you the truth or not.
Have you thought about success and post-independence? Would you be back to Scotland? Would you give up political controversy, or would you enter mainstream politics? What have you got in mind for Stuart Campbell in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I've always said that I would move home if we got independence. I'd move home permanently, and I'm torn from day to day about whether that would be to form a new political party or to go and live in a cave with no internet for the rest of my life.
We're sure you're going to be taking over from Willie Rennie as a convinced Liberal Democrat voter here.
Well, I think somebody needs to.
Stuart Campbell, I can't assure you of a political career, But what I can do is present you with the Alex Salmond Quake for appearing on the show. Now, you know the drill. There's no, even here in Bath, you'll be able to get your hands on a good Scotch and only Scotch.
Indeed you will. Thank you very much, Alex.
Great pleasure, Stuart.
Let us dwell for a second on the extent of the achievement of the 3 blogs we have covered thus far in this series. From bases centred in Scottish and Northern Irish politics, Wings Over Scotland's Slugger O'Toole and the Craig Murray blog have generated huge interest to soar into the UK top 10. These 3 are very different in style and content. Craig Murray's pen roams far and wide, providing devastating critique of UK international policy. Slugger O'Toole has become the key source of impartial information on the politics of the province, while Wings mounts scathing demolitions of the pro-union mainstream media in Scotland. It should be said that this does not endear Wings Over Scotland's site to those on the receiving end of the searing analysis, and some, particularly in the hierarchy of the national movement, also find Wings' social media presence far too hot to handle. Stuart Campbell does point out that the Wings Over Scotland blog should be regarded as a distinct entity from the Wings Twitter account. But some do not accept this distinction and argue that it is counterproductive. Of course, political blogs are not the same thing as political parties, as Liberal voter Stuart Campbell wryly points out. What Wings Over Scotland has done beyond argument is attract a dedicated readership of energised and politically aware adherents, while the production of the Wee Blue Book had a demonstrable public effect on the politics of the Scottish independence referendum of 2014. A real impact transcending the rarefied virtual world of the online political campaigners. The new edition, promised exclusively on this show, will be eagerly awaited by the Yes movement in Scotland and regarded with some degree of trepidation by the pro-union campaigners. Next week we turn from featuring the online politics of today to feature filming of the past. Angus McFadden first shot to stardom in 1995 with his portrayal of the Scottish hero King Robert the Bruce in the multi-Oscar-winning Braveheart. Now with an extensive filmography under his belt, he's back at the Edinburgh International Film Festival and as Robert the Bruce to pick up the broadsword once again. This is not a sequel, but tells a new story. Join us next week to find out whether this new film will have the same dramatic impact. Until then, from Alex and myself and all at the show, it's goodbye for now.